A mindfulness practice involves bringing your attention to what is happening in the present moment. It's been used for thousands and thousands of years in ancient Eastern and Buddhist philosophy. It is shown to help folks, including children and adults, who struggle with anxiety, with focus, with depression, with chronic pain, and it really works to improve overall heart conditions and health. It's been known to help people lead a holistically well life.
We live in a busy world. We eat dinner while checking emails and scrolling through social media. We fold laundry while keeping one eye on the television and the other on the kids. We make plans while running errands. But while multitasking to accomplish so many things throughout our day, we rob ourselves of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of living in the present moment, being fully engaged in what's happening in our surroundings with acceptance and without judgment. Studies have found mindfulness to improve the quality of people's sleep and problem solving, to reduce stress and chronic pain, to strengthen the body's immune system. It is also said to help improve our mental health by helping with depression, anxiety, and loneliness. Mindfulness is also found in many types of meditation, including Vipassana, mantra, or Tai Chi. Mindfulness has been shown to improve employee overall well-being and increase productivity by as much as 120%. More and more Fortune 500 companies like Google, General Mills, and Apple are offering meditation to their teams. Incredibly successful entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and athletes like Oprah, Richard Branson, and LeBron James have used meditation to help their own decision-making and performance. So with so much information and evidence about how mindfulness can transform our lives, why aren't more people practicing it?
It is estimated that up to 500 million people worldwide have practiced meditation at least once in their lifetime. I'm one of them. I meditate when I'm in the shower. I meditate when I'm walking the dogs. I meditate when I'm going for a jog. My deepest meditation, though, has been when I'm scuba diving. I'm fully entrenched. And of course, when I'm swimming. I don't get much of that anymore, but I love those moments. I actually let moments surround me to enable my alpha theta state. Even when I'm watching my veggies blend into a smoothie, I'm in that moment of mindfulness. I'm Prakriti Poddar, the global head of mental health and well-being at RoundGlass. And coming to America, which is in the recent times, really helped me understand the osmosis of being in a culture that was embedded in spirituality. And while working on what we do at RoundGlass, I realized the gratitude of my past, of my spiritual upbringing, in a sense, and bringing those reminders to a global context. I've recognized that it's needed more than ever now, not only because of the current circumstances and situations that surround us, but we all need reminders to live in a more holistic way, in a more mindful way. And I wanted to bring those reminders for everyday mindfulness practices to all our audience today. And what we have with us is a beautifully curated panel of experts who not only live their own mindfulness journey, but help other people remember the depth of what living mindfully can bring to them through joy in their lives, through the practice of a little bit of breath work and pause, and really creating that space between their actions and reactions to live a more harmonious and well-being entrenched life. So I'd like to introduce my panel. I'll start with Elena, who is one of the most respected voices, both in yoga and mindfulness. She's a mom, an artist, a best-selling author, a teacher, and the host of Practice You, a podcast, by the way, that I've started listening to and love. It's been great actually going through your work, and I found a lot of nuggets of wisdom through listening to your work. So thank you for being here. We have with us a mindfulness performance whisperer. And I remember the first time I met George Mumford, I was blown away instantly. You could feel the power and the magic in his being as he not only spoke about what he does, but also really talked about how he's helping and bringing about changes in people's lives through all the work that he teaches. He's an expert in psychology and performance. He's taught NBA legends like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and helped a lot of teams, NBA teams and championships to really highlight and invigorate the minds of these champions. And he shares his revolutionary program for elevating the game. Welcome, George Mumford, to our panel. And also joining us is Jay Vidyarthi, who is an attention activist. I remember the first time I was introduced to Jay, I was told about his phenomenal skills of creating technology for mindfulness. And he is the founder of Still Ape, the world's first UX design studio focused exclusively on mindfulness, compassion, and well-being. I really wanted to adopt him, but he's more focused on making sure that everybody receives his skills. He's also launched a course recently with RoundGlass here, and you can actually go through all his meditations that he's created on attention, activism, and practical meditations. Welcome, Jay, to our panel. I don't know, while getting to know your work and which, like I mentioned, was truly inspiring. Actually, your story is truly inspiring. I heard on your podcast where you mentioned, or I think your guest might have mentioned it, but like flesh on the bones of understanding, and that sentence stuck with me, and I'm like, that is exactly what we're trying to do here. We really want to, you've heard about mindfulness and practice of mindfulness, and everybody talks about it, and people know the importance of it, but really to put flesh on the bones of that is what we're here to do. We wanna make people lose that fear of what meditation means, and to really surround themselves by creating a habit of the practice. So I'd like to start with the definition of what mindfulness really is, and then move into your understanding. So John Kabat-Zinn, of course, who's considered the godfather of modern mindfulness, defined it in this way, where he said, mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally, as if your life depended on it. And this is like a very short statement, but if you break it down, it might take your entire life to get to what that really means for yourself. So I'd like all of you to really define what mindfulness is in your own words. Elena, I'd like to start with you.
For me, developing the practice was a very long process. When I finally came to a regular, consistent daily practice, what I found and what I continue to find is that the practice helps me be more tolerant of ambiguity. Placing my attention in certain ways at certain times is a choice that helps me to stay focused on what it is that I'm doing, so that I don't feel overwhelmed and I don't feel like I have, no agency in things. For me, that's what mindfulness really is. It's about being more and more tolerant, increasingly more tolerant of ambiguity in the space.
And that's super important, especially nowadays where our environmental circumstances are ambiguous. So thank you for that. I'd like, George, for you to give your definition of mindfulness.
Mindfulness, I talk about mirror mind. So mindfulness is a process that allows us to see what's there, like it just reflects what's in front of us, and allowing whatever data we're taking in, whatever the raw data is, to speak for itself. So it's a process where we actually create the process of perception is elongated, so we have more time to actually observe the characteristics of the raw data. So a lot of times we have just a very short period of time where we're just seeing the raw data before it gets embellished with self-reference and associative thinking, abstract thinking, and just embellishment based on what we already know. And the idea of the whole training is to be able to just allow things to speak to themselves and to create more space, so we're not embellishing things, we're getting more of the raw data. So if you think about a mountain lake and you have, and it's very calm, and you can see the snow, especially if you're talking Seattle, you can see the snow and the mountain just reflected in the lake without any embellishment, without any anything other than just the raw data being perceived. And so mindfulness is a process. It's challenging to talk about it until you experience it, but it's being able to see things as they are without interpreting, interrupting, or projecting onto it.
That's amazing. So what your definition is really about looking at something without any judgment. Every
fresh
single
eyes.
time.
Yes,
Fresh
it's like with a
eyes.
beginner's
Every
mind.
time.
With fresh eyes, you're seeing it new, and that's the challenge. How do we see the same thing that happens every day in a way where we're letting it speak to us in new and amazing ways? So we have to be in this sense of wonder, or this sense of investigation, this interest of letting things speak to us in its own language. And it takes a lot of being vulnerable, being willing to be interpreted. And I talk about this in my book, The Mindful Athlete Secrets to Pure Performance. So you definitely need faith, but you also need to make the effort, and you also need concentration, and you also need the right information. What are you looking at? So be mindful. Okay, mindfulness by itself is not enough. You got to know, what are you being mindful of, and what are the characteristics. So I think we make it simple, but it's very complicated on some level. It's about, you got to know, be mindful of the time. So you got to be mindful of the time. So you need mindfulness, but you also need some form of insight or information or wisdom that works with it. So mindfulness by itself is not enough. It has to be supported by things like clearly knowing and being diligent and not being distracted.
Thank you for that. And Jay, how do
Yeah,
you define mindfulness?
there are so many frameworks, and I really like, George, what you said about the experience versus the conceptual. So all these frameworks are kind of windows that we can look through, but really what we're talking about is something on the other side of the window that the concepts fail to capture. But for me, I mean, I'm only partway through this journey, but so far what I've kind of realized from these processes is that I am what I pay attention to, and I am how I pay attention. And so if you take John Kabat-Zinn's definition or any others, they're basically pointing at a quality of attention that when trained becomes who you are. So if you train to pay attention in a way that is non-judgmental, as we just discussed, you become non-judgmental. And if you train to pay attention with a heightened sense of clarity, you become clear. And if you train to pay attention to certain things, you become those things. Certain people, you become those people. Certain sources of entertainment, you become those pieces of entertainment. So really the question of mindfulness is one of who you are, and the elements of attention and clarity and insight and balance and all these factors and conceptual definitions are different wonderful roads to shift who you are into something that's much larger than this small me, into this larger kind of collective understanding of we, that is possible by paying attention in a certain way. And I don't know, that's as far as I've got, but it's been a miraculous experience so far.
That's amazing. Yeah, that actually takes me to the story that we read in our mythology in India in the 1st century, millennial BCE, Our text is called the Bhagavad Gita, and there's a story of focus there. It's called the eye of the bird. I don't know if you know about it, but Dronacharya, who was this guru of the Pandavas, who were the five kings, which is Pandavas, the five kings of the Mahabharata, and he was claimed to have favoritism towards one of them, and he clearly said he didn't have any favoritism, but wanted to show people why Arjuna was a little bit more evolved than the others. So what he did was he put this bird in a tree. It was a fake bird, and he asked all his disciples what they saw. And all of them, being trained in meditation and mindfulness, really spoke to the fact that they saw that bird, they saw the leaves, they saw the tree. And when it came to Arjun, he said, I can see the eye. And when Dronacharya asked him, what else can you see around that? He said, I can't see anything else. I can only see the eye. I cannot see the tree. I cannot see the bird. I cannot see you. I cannot see me. And that is the invocation of true attention. Like, it's a focus with the defocus, which is what mindfulness really brings. So I love that you just spoke about attention, and all of you, I mean, who are here have probably had that experience of hyper focus and defocus. And I would love for you to share your personal experience of that feeling and that state of being with the audience, so they can understand why practicing mindfulness is such a joy. Elena, I'd like to start with you.
I can think of the moments with my child, who's now 15, now a man. When I am in my practice and very consistent with it, I don't take things personally. I find myself very capable of allowing whatever his mood is to sort of pass through me without grabbing onto it. And I think as a parent, mindfulness is very, very useful in this way, because a lot of what a child is going through, and it wasn't so long ago that I was 15, I'm only 51 now. And I remember being 15. And I remember having these experiences where my parents were just in the way. And I'm sure that I was really rude and disrespectful a lot. And I feel when my son gets into that space, I know now that because of my mindfulness practice, I know that none of this is about me. This is about his own experience, the trials of being a teenager, and I can kind of take it in stride in a different way. I also notice when I'm not practicing and I can't take it in stride, and I do grip on to the I'm right and he's wrong and this is wrong and that, I do much better when my practice is prioritized.
Thank you. Parenting is a huge challenge. I mean, I have 3 kids. I can totally resonate with that. And George is teaching people who are children as well. George, I'd love to hear your take on it.
So you want to repeat it? Because I'm not sure I caught exactly everything you were asking for. You were talking about this, so you can repeat it so I make sure
I would love for you to talk about, I would love for you to share your experience of your greatest experience of mindfulness that really helped you achieve focus and defocus, both those states together.
Well, there's a lot of them, but I think for me, when I was involved in athletics, but even now, but I think athletics is really easy to talk about, is when you're performing, like playing basketball or even running. I ran cross country. That what happens, and maybe I'll talk about it. So this was when I first got into mindfulness. I had experienced chronic pain, and those are the days when I was running. And people know when you run and you jog, sometimes you get a stitch or you get a kind of pain in your side, and it could be so painful that you have to stop running and you have to walk. And I remember running, and when the pain started arising, when it started and it kept going, because I had this ability to create space between stimulus and response, I can observe the pain and just, whoa, observe the sensation, the bare sensation, and just let it be there. And it was one of the first times that I had it, and it didn't stop me from running. I could continue to run, but I made space for it. And so it's almost like I was just running, and there was a lack of self-consciousness, and there was just an allowing, a spaciousness around, just allowing the pain to be there, just noticing it without identifying with it, and what we call bare awareness, just noticing the sensation. It was just burning. It was a tightness, twisting, and what I noticed is by observing it that it was ebbing and flowing. It was intense, and then it would dissipate. And so it was this amorphous thing. It wasn't this solid thing as it had been before. So my experience totally was different from it, and I was just enjoying being out there running, feeling the elements, and just feeling my body, moving in this sort of rhythm and this flow.
Thank you. And Jay, your experience, your personal experience with this state of being.
Yeah. Before I even went on retreats and had a deep mindfulness practice, I was playing music with some friends that I had sort of had a band with. And we had this 2-hour jam session. At the very end, I felt this profound state of clarity and concentration and well-being. And I recognized it very clearly as sort of what my ancestors had been talking about. And that sort of started me on the journey of meditation. And then more recently, I was on a retreat, and I had what I would describe as a very similar experience, except I was listening to the radiator humming. And I think there's some sort of interesting insight in the contrast there, that we all experience mindfulness all the time, even if we don't practice. If you happen to come around the corner to a beautiful view, or you get a glimpse of a sunset, or you hear a great piece of music. But when you start to train these practices and achieve a similar state of mind, dealing with your angry teenager, or listening to the radiator, you start to train this muscle of being able to live through your life, that it doesn't really matter. You don't have to go out searching all these pleasureful experiences, that you can find joy and gratitude in almost everything you experience, even the hard parts.
Thank you. And I love, Jay, how you keep bringing up the training and the practice, and, being somebody who actually does biofeedback and EEG biofeedback for, to train the brain. It really is a practice, and you really need to set the frequency and make sure that you achieve that through, I know you've created the parts of the muse as well. And it really helps you to get your brain to perform at the level that it feels good at. And that's the whole thing about meditation and mindfulness. When you start achieving that state of expanse in your being, you almost need to plug into it to feel that spark in your life. It's almost like I want to plug in and feel and be in that. And I think that is exactly what I want to help our audience achieve, a taster, a feeling of what that really is, the gift of it, and how do you draw that into your life and make it a part of your everyday being. And talking about the fact that it could become. So the way in which they define it when I was studying biofeedback was that it is an addiction, like the Pavlov's theory. It is an addiction. Your brain starts to enjoy it and wants to achieve that state. And talking about addictions, I mean, I feel, and I've always felt, that we are prone to addictions as human beings. Like, we are prone to continue to do things that we really enjoy doing. And of course, sometimes that is not as healthy, and sometimes it's healthy. So I want to move people from the unhealthy to the healthy. And I know you've all also had your experience of different types of addictions, and really coming to mindfulness to help those. And I'd really like to talk about your struggles that actually led to this practice as well. If you'd like to share that, that would be great, because your personal stories of your journey would help people who are struggling in their worlds come to a better, a more holistic, and a lighter addiction that may aid them. So I'd like to, Elena, start with you and your story.
My addiction was to marijuana for many, many years. What I ended up realizing when I finally stopped 7 years ago was the state that I was longing for when I was getting high is the same exact state that I get to in the morning when I sit before anything else has happened. It's a state of full presence, full attention, where everything in the brain kind of, while it's actually physiologically speeding up, actually feels like it's slowing down. I put the breath in charge, which is what used to happen when I would smoke. And I feel a sense of closeness to myself. And I was seeking that in the drugs. And now I get to have it, naturally with myself in the quiet of the pre-dawn hours. It's the best gift ever. And after 7 years of nothing, no mind-altering substances at all, I think that I am actually in better shape now, physiologically and mentally, than I was 20 years ago.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know that in one of your podcasts, I heard you say to somebody who goes on and off drugs and nicotine, and this was nicotine, and you said, are you on it? And he said, yeah, I'm on it right now. And you said, yeah, I'm a little bit jealous that you're on it right now. And I thought, yeah, it's a struggle. I mean, you have to be so mindful every day. And I want that to be, I want the audience to know that, that it is, you have to be you're mindful to keep yourself on that beautiful path where you're choosing yourself. And I think that's, so honorable and commendable. I loved that. Thank you for that. And George, I'd like to hear from you.
Well, I want to start off by saying that the nervous system is not biased. We're programmed to move towards what is pleasant, avoid or what is unpleasant. And if it's neither pleasant or unpleasant, we kind of space out. So it's not personal. So and the body is looking for equilibrium, or homeostasis is what they call it. But I got addicted to pain meds. Then I was addicted to heroin and alcohol, and I had a serious substance abuse issue. I used to have to get high 2-3 times a day just to be normal. And then when I got clean in 1984. I realized I had chronic pain, so I really had to figure out how to manage the pain without using drugs. And so at this point, let me see, I just celebrated my 70th birthday on Saturday, and I've been clean for 37 years, wow. 37 years and some months. And I feel I have more enthusiasm and excitement about life than I've ever had. And the highs that I have now, you can't touch that with all of those drugs. All those drugs do is just stimulate what's already in me. So I'm not talking from a theory point of view. I'm talking about my experience. I mean, it's taken me decades to be able to wear short sleeve shirts, because before I had tracks, and there have been a lot of years that I could not wear. I wear long sleeve shirts all the time because I had so many track marks on in my arms and stuff like that. So for me, just finding my divinity, just finding my Buddha nature, my Christ consciousness, for me, this is what it came down to, is me just realizing that I didn't need anything outside of me to make me feel good. It was an inside job, and that mindfulness. And so I live a lot of my life in flow now. Mindfulness makes me flow ready. What do I mean by flow? That means that I really don't know what the hell I'm doing, but it ends up being great. I just show up and show out. And so this idea of the joy of discovery and the endorphins that get released when I am breaking boundaries, when I am getting beyond my addictions and creating a way of being where it's joy now or never. I think Krishnamurti said, peace now or never. I kind of co-opted his thing and say joy now or never. So it's not like I'm looking for pleasure, but I'm just being fully engaged in the moment and being able to express myself, and that's enough. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. I'm practicing mindfulness all the time. So if you think about the philosopher Dr. Dre, and he said, "I got my mind on money, money on my mind." That's meditation. To me, it's what my mind is on, I become. So
Yes.
if I have peace on my mind, I have my mind on peace. If I have love on my mind, I have my mind on love. If I have joy on my mind, I have my mind on joy. So it's understanding that we become what we think about. There's a book called The Strangest Secret, and that's what it says. We become what we think about. So meditation is not just being in silence, it's understanding what are we holding in mind and what are we creating. And so for me, just letting go of the drugs and just focusing on my endorphins and my whatever it is that happens as a result of me being able to continue to be in this joyful journey of self-discovery. It's just, you can't touch it. It's amazing.
Thank you, and happy birthday. It's
Thank you.
great. Jay, I'd like to hear your personal journey into mindfulness.
Yeah, I think, it's going to be tough to talk about addiction after that beautiful share from George. I think there's something that we have to be careful about the language we use, because when we talk about cravings and addiction, there's a sort of spectrum there. And we're sort of wired to crave those pleasureful experiences. And I want to be careful that in this conversation, we don't confuse the benefits of mindfulness with just another kind of pleasure. That there's sort of a leaning here about, you feel this blissed out, which I think is one of the biggest misconceptions about meditation, that in fact, it's how we relate to our experience, even when those experiences are really difficult and really challenging. So even if we have anger and we have pain and we have discomfort, or we have those aggressive cravings and addictions, that we can find mindfulness in how we relate to those, that we don't judge ourselves and we give ourselves space and we forgive ourselves and we work on what we pay attention to help cultivate who we want to become in the present moment. So if we can cultivate who we want to become in the present moment, then we be who we want to become. And there's a sort of sense there where there's a wanting. And so the paradox conceptually that you want to become something, but to do so without the aggressive striving of desire, is a paradox that only exists in words, that somehow in the experience we can walk that tightrope quite skillfully. My own journey, I tend to have conversations like this with fellow meditators and practitioners, and I often find that a lot of people's story come from responding to some negative experience. For me, it was actually a little different. I was sort of more of a proactive pursuer of mindfulness. It's not that I was dealing with aggressive anxiety or depression or addiction, but more kind of what George described in the zoning out in the neutral experience. That was kind of I was reaching my third decade on the planet, and I was just sort of ambivalent. What's the point? What's the point of all this? Why are we doing this? Why am I going to school? Who cares? And I think there was a natural curiosity that was born from that led me to start to pursue these practices. And instead of a kind of story of, I had this anxiety, then I healed my anxiety, and then I found something deeper, my story is more like I was aimless, purposeless, and selfish, but thankfully a little curious. And I was just looking for something interesting, and I ended up becoming purposeful, very clear, and a lot less selfish. And that has led this to become my life's work. So it's really been a journey of, less I was struggling and then I found this light and it saved me. My story is more I was what's the point of all this? And I was maybe this will be interesting. And then I was surprised to find it was a lot more than just interesting. It was transformative. And that I truly believe I'm a different person than I would have been, namely a lot less selfish, a lot kinder, a better dad, more professionally goal-directed in a place of benefit for other people, all because of this practice that I thought was just going to be something more interesting than the next video game.
Thank you for that. I mean, these transformative stories will really help people find their sort of path into this practice as well. So thank you for sharing those. I mean, I always think that it is avenues like this that help people achieve purposeful healing as well. And this whole day today is about practical meditations and mindfulness. And the reason I was thinking about it at RoundGlass, why do we want to talk about practical mindfulness, is because I've noticed while talking to people who are non-meditators, there is a fear around whether they can achieve a state of a meditation. And giving them nuggets of practical mindfulness became a journey that I decided to take with the company as well, and with everybody that we speak to who are experts. So it's really about how do they grow their personal practice through everyday moments. And it's like small moments in their everyday life where they can pick up or focus or tune themselves into what could become a practical mindfulness session for them, in a sense. And Elena, if I could start with you, what do you recommend? And you could do this chronologically, like go through it in your day and think about, okay, in the day, in these moments, I could embed practical mindfulness. So I'd love to hear from all of you, actually, around the same, starting with you, Elena.
Most recently, I feel like I have a deep relationship to the practice of giving myself compassion. What I found is I'm most present when I'm being confronted and I'm forced to turn my attention on my own sensations and feel where exactly I need to put my own attention and care and empathy so that I can stay present to this conflict, confrontation, whatever it is. I think that's my most useful and possibly most efficient offering.
Thank you. And how would if it was for somebody else, like, just the audience who's listening who has no idea about how to do this, how could we simplify that hook for them?
You put your hand on your heart. Let's say somebody is coming at you in a way that feels really uncomfortable, or you're feeling overwhelmed by the number of tasks at hand. You can put your hand on your heart and just have a moment to grant yourself empathy, compassion, a sensation of closeness to yourself. You belong to yourself. And then just take a breath and wait a moment and see if your state, your chemistry has shifted, even just a little bit. You're on the path.
Thank you. And George, I know that you work with high performers, and their hooks might be slightly different. I would love for you to share a practical mindfulness moment for those hyper-stressed situations.
Yes, well, it's interesting because it's the same whether sometimes performance is just not getting high, or not saying no to something versus being in a big game or whatever. It's the same drill. I was thinking that one thing that would make sense is, this is before I even knew about mindfulness. When I got out of the detox, the compulsion to use came over me, and what I did was I went into the bathroom, and I went and sat down on the toilet, and I kept reciting the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I kept repeating it, and the obsession was removed. It just went away. And so that was even before I knew about it. It was just this is what I'm saying. We have a masterpiece within. We have that still small voice within that knows, just like a broken non-digital clock is right twice a day. There's a part of us that knows. We just don't embrace that. So to me, it's really just getting clear. So when I did that, what was that about? It's because I knew I didn't want to get high, and I knew if I didn't change my mind that I was in trouble. And so I learned from going there, because I had been going to 12-step meetings for 3 months, 4 months before I went into the detox. And so it's really more about just asking myself, what do I want? And what do I need to do? Or who do I need to be to do what I wanted to do? So I knew I didn't want to get high. So it's about just sitting down, just sitting and breathing, or praying, or meditating, or just breathing in, breathing out, and just noticing how you're feeling, and then focusing on what you want. And so for me, the desire to not go, because I knew where that led, is just changing the mind. So just like Dr. Dre says, think about what you want and have what you want on your mind. You have to reflect. But I talk about awareness of breathing, just sitting and breathing and knowing it. You know it right now that you're sitting, I'm sitting, and I'm breathing. I'm breathing in, feeling my entire body, breathing out, feeling my entire body. I love what Elena said. You can put one palm on your sternum and just notice what that feeling, just breathe in and out, and just say, breathing in, I am here, breathing out, I am here. And just focus on that and get access to what I call the eye of the hurricane, or that still small voice. We have to stop. We have to change the trajectory, and the way we can do that is just to be with our breath, with His life. Just breathing in. You can do it consciously, breathing in, breathing out, and just breathing in, breathing out, and just staying on that. And that could be, because we have to stop. So Thich Nhat Hanh talks about stopping, calming, resting, healing. So we have to figure out a way, just like you drop a stone into the lake, the mountain lake, and the stone will drop down and rest on the lake bottom. So we are wired, we can do that. If we can just be still and know, if we can just say, okay, why don't I just give myself a focus and just focus on that, have that on my mind, and my mind on that. But then we can have that glimpse, just like I had. You're going to get a taste of what it's like when we can when we can focus on things that help us to calm down, help us to rebody ourselves, remind ourselves.
Thank you. That's great. I think both of you have touched upon allowing yourself the time and the compassion to feel what's coming up, and taking that moment to let it pass before, instead of getting caught in the web of it. And Jay, I'd like to hear from you as well around this, because I know that, some people have claimed, I've heard this in their talks as well on podcasts, that they are comfortably numb, sort of frozen in a sense, and practice can really allow, that to thaw and bring the spark of life back. And what would be a practical mindfulness a session or task for them to be able to bring back life in that numbness?
First of all, I appreciate the Pink Floyd reference. And I think the comfortably numb, it's sort of, I think, a meme in society these days where we talk in these grandiose terms, right? Where, people are comfortably numb. Well, who's numb? What does comfortably numb mean? And what specifically are making people comfortably numb? And I think that would be a point of reflection in one's own life, which is there something specific that is contributing to my numbness? And when I work with people are surprisingly quickly at identifying exactly what that thing is. And, I work in technology, I work as a technology designer, and I have a view into how technology is created. And I can say that there are certain media technologies and entertainment technologies that are in our society that come up again and again as something that makes you feel a little bit disconnected and comfortably numb. You get sold a sort of comfortable illusion, like, you want to be social, but it's a lot of work and it's chaotic and risky to go out somewhere. So getting a little bit of this feeling like you're connected on a social media feels like just enough so you're a little comfortable, but at the end of the day, you feel alone. And that's a kind of example of a recipe of a technology that can contribute to, over time, you think you've got a lot of friends, but when's the last time you spent a night with a person you care about in the flesh and really deeply connected with them, right? So you can think of the same thing about video games and Netflix and entertainment technologies. You can think the same thing about pornography and sexual urges. You can think about the news and moral outrage. And I think, in terms of the tip, I'm fond of saying that in the modern world, a healthy relationship with technology and media is a prerequisite to mindfulness. That in fact, if you don't have a healthy relationship with the media environment that we've all created for ourselves, that all of the wonderful practices of getting space for yourself and offering yourself self-compassion becomes 10 times harder. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I do need to practice some more of that, that's great. But if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I can't, I've tried, I don't know how it's working, what I might invert is say, is there something stopping you from having the space in your mind to do that? And my tip might be to shape your environment to remove your access to that, whether that means canceling your Netflix account or locking the internet out of your bedroom or getting rid of your TV, or just as something as simple as turning your phone off at 9 p.m. and turning it back on at 9 a.m. But you know what it is. All of those things are not bad. Netflix is great. There's amazing shows on Netflix. But if you know personally that that is the thing that is making you comfortably numb, then you can reconsider it. So the question is, what is that thing for you? And while you consider these amazing suggestions of proactive things you can do and changes to the way you relate to your life experiences, you might also want to consider, are there obstacles you might want to get rid of, or changes you want to make in your environment or your access points that might help you do that?
Well, thank you. And, the reason I'm laughing is because, like I mentioned before, I have 3 kids. and the kids are a disaster. I mean, they are walking around, sleepwalking with their 5-inch screens. And every time I see this, and I'm like, my mindfulness goes for a toss. I'm like,
right.
When
it comes to kids, I've got he's almost 3, so I haven't dealt with probably the worst of it in the teenage years. But what I will say is, I grew up with technology. I grew up playing video games, with the early ages of technology. And here I am talking about mindfulness and awareness. It's not necessarily that technology is inherently bad. For example, as a gamer, I can tell you, if you see your kid playing games and you find yourself instinctively being like, that's enough, stop playing games, you've made an error because you haven't looked at what they're actually playing. There's a difference between going on technology and killing people in a death simulator and creating a beautiful virtual world in Minecraft that you can share with your friends. I think really the skills that we need to offer the next generation are the skills to discern what technologies can actually provoke mindfulness and compassion and awareness versus the technologies that suck it out of us. And I also think teaching kids to have technology in their lives and learn when to turn it off themselves, as opposed to removing it from their life altogether, because you're not really equipping them for the world they're born into if you do that. So it's a very, very tricky thing. I don't have all the answers on it, but I certainly know that some of the pitfalls are just branding all technology bad. These kids are growing up in a technological world, and it's not doing them any service to create a lot of shame and judgment and self-judgment in their minds around it.
I can also say too that, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Elena. I'll speak after you.
A short addendum to that, which is I sort of spent several years freaking out, like I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing with regards to the kid and letting him just kind of play and do. He wore himself out. And after several years of having real kind of free reign and, go to sleep when you feel it's time for you to go to sleep and see how it feels in the morning to go to school. He's now 15. He shuts everything down at 9 p.m. He comes in, practices the piano for an hour. I don't tell him what to do. He's not even taking lessons right now. He's just practicing and teaching himself. All of this he arrived at by himself. I didn't make him do anything. I sort of let him navigate. And they, your kids will find their way. They will realize that they don't need to have their head in a screen all day in order to have a life.
True. George, you were going to add to it as well?
Yes. What I was going to say is one of the main benefits of having a spiritual practice, especially if we're talking about meditation and mindfulness, is the recognition of what's helpful and what's not helpful, what's wholesome, what's not wholesome. So it's not so much what we're doing as how it's affecting us and how we are being with it. And so in that sense, it's just really understanding, okay, when I play these games or when I'm doing this, I get all hyper, or when I do this, I get more relaxed, or when I do this, I feel like I'm more focused. We have to start understanding, and it's an inside job because we're all different, what's helpful and what is not helpful. That's the main thing, is knowing what's helpful and sustaining that, continuing that, and noticing what's not helpful. So it could be if you're angry, you got anger, it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. If you're taking the anger and you're channeling it in a way where you're making meaningful change versus just having an aversion to anger or being frustrated or whatever it is. But we have to get to a point where we have to say, is this helpful or is it not helpful? Is it hurting me or is it hurting someone else? And being really honest about that. And to me, without mindfulness, if we're not looking at what we're doing and what impact it's having, that's a problem.
Yeah, 100%. And George, I've actually heard you also talk about to make a breakthrough, you need to make a break with something. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah. So I'm a Star Wars fan. So when Luke Skywalker was working with Yoda, and Yoda told him, you have to unlearn all that you have learned. And so on some level, you have to change, Einstein said the significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we first created them. And so there's this need to really understand our consciousness level and really understand, So I would say, it's just really, I think Jay talked about clarity and being clear about what our intention is and understanding what we need to do in order to achieve what we need to achieve. So it doesn't matter who I'm working with or what I'm doing. I always ask the same question: what do you want? And who do you need to be to do what you want to do? So I don't know, does that make sense? What I'm saying, just keeping it really, really simple about just reflection is really important to reflect on before, during, and after, because true understanding comes from reflecting on experience. But oftentimes when I was a substance abuser, I was not looking at what the consequences were going to be of when I was doing it. But when I started getting deliberate and started challenging assumptions, then that's when I started making some progress. When I could say, okay, if I do that, this is probably what's going to happen. No, I don't want that. So it's not to be done. And so it's really more about, a lot of it, we talk about sitting in silence, but a lot of it is right thinking and seeing things in a way where we're looking for love, we're looking for compassion, the opposite of greed, which could be renunciation, generosity, the opposite of hate, which is goodwill or love, compassion, and the opposite of ignorance is wisdom or insight, trying to understand, seeking to understand. So it's really, really simple. And a lot of we can do in a day is just really being clear about, well, what am I doing? What's my intention? What's the best way to do it? They call this mindfulness and clear comprehension, like understanding what's my intention, what's my purpose, and what's the result potentially going to be. So we need to get into this habit of reflecting on experience to get the understanding, but to understand what the consequences are of what we're doing through word, thought, and deed.
Thank you. And Jay, I know that you may have some response to that, but you also have experience of utilizing mindfulness and meditation to work through chronic anxiety. And I'd like you to share that experience because you've seen it in close
So I
quarters.
haven't personally experienced chronic anxiety, but my wife, who is also a meditator, lives with chronic anxiety. So the first thing I'll say is, I knew you were going to ask me this question. I asked her consent to share her experience, which she gave me, which is very
Good.
important. And so what she had to share is, I don't claim, I can't speak from someone else's experience. So I'm going to give you kind of her exact words, that most helpful is the clarity it gives me to see how I'm feeling moment to moment. Am I tense or relaxed? It helps me really sink into my feelings and explore them fully without judgment. Living with anxiety can be very frustrating and isolating. And mindfulness helps me see my thoughts and feelings and actions with more compassion and non judgment. And one of the things that my wife has struggled with early on in the practice was, because the anxiety was so frustrating and isolating for her, she really wanted meditation to just fix it. She was just always like, is this going to fix me or what? And if it didn't fix it, it felt like a failure, or felt like it wasn't worth her time. And that made it doubly difficult for her to actually do the meditation. But when at some point she communicated to me after a retreat that we went on together, actually, that she had realized that mindfulness was a tool to help her live with it and not a tool to make it go away, that it became an incredibly empowering force in her life. And as her husband, I see her do it. I see her get tense. She recognizes that she has anxiety. She puts everything away. She does a few yoga stretches. She does a little meditation. She asks for space from me. I can be a little overbearing, as you probably can tell. So she knows how to take care of herself. She's like, I'm feeling this now. It's not that the mindfulness makes it go away. The mindfulness helps me see it clearly and take some very skillful actions to take care of myself with that self-compassion that Elena so beautifully described earlier. She really is a proponent of that practice to deal with her anxiety. So again, any mistakes in that are mine, but I'm sharing someone else's experience here with consent.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And to wrap it up, I mean, we're getting to the end of this, and I really want everybody who's joined us to go home with techniques that can help them feel more alive. And if you can give us 2 tips of what you think could be techniques that they can take home with them, that would be great. Elena, starting with you.
No worries. I think that the one most important is to just set a time every day where you're going to just meet yourself in the space. That's it. Just getting closer to yourself. Jay's wife is having that experience, I'm sure. It's very much about keeping the appointment with yourself so that you can have the experience. You're sort of meeting the muse. And then the second tip, it's probably not to start with too high of a lofty goal, and just go with 2 minutes to begin, and then work your way up to 5, and then maybe to 10 or 20, and just see, feel into the chemistry of your experience and see when it shifts optimally, and then stick with that for a little while and be willing to change that too.
Thank you. George.
I would start off with the recognition that we have Buddha nature or Christ consciousness or divinity or masterpiece, and we're beginning from that. So there's nothing wrong with us. We just have to get access to it, to be still and know. And there's various ways of doing that. And I would say, I'll mention 3 of them. One is prayer. Another one is meditation, in the sense of just being aware of breathing. And the third thing would be service. Sometimes we have to forget ourselves to find ourselves. Think about helping somebody else.
Thank you. Jay.
Tip 1, start small and enjoy the success, as opposed to starting large and feeling shame about the failure. Tip number 2, don't take it too seriously. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. Let it be something you enjoy, like a good book that you come back to, as opposed to another task on your to-do list.
Thank you. I remember in India, I would go and listen to this guy's satsang called Ramesh Balsekar. He was an enlightened man, and all he said was, just take a glass of beer and sit down. And Think about, when was the last time you created gray in your hair? And he says, that's it, just do that. And I think it's really time, to pause, to introspect, to eliminate the self-sabotage and the self-injury. And it's time to breathe. It's time to invest in gratitude. And it's time to really expand your soul. And as George says, feel that Christ consciousness, which you have, claim it. Claim your moments, claim your joy, claim your holistic well-being. We have, of course, RoundGlass, and it'll help you, experience different meditations. And we offer live sessions here 3 times a day, courses and classes and guided meditations, mini meditations, and practical meditations. We also have music for you to meditate to. So thank you so much for joining us. And I hope everybody has a mindful journey ahead. Goodbye for now.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.